All right, folks, so this would be our piecewise function equation that describes that graph. So now what we are going to be doing to kind of get the feel for piecewise functions is we are going to practice evaluating piecewise functions given a certain x value. So we're going to move on to the algebraic side of things, looking at this yucky little piecewise function that has 3 different function pieces. We are going to be looking at different inputs. So the first input says, what is f of -4? So -4 is my input. So just to show you graphically what this would look like, let's say I wanted to plug something like -4 in on this function. Here would be -4. And I would want to plug it into the pink function because -4 is an x value that's less than 0. So I wouldn't want to plug into the blue function because that's on this side of the graph. So what's nice is we can actually see how our input works in our bound statements as far as choosing which function we will plug into. So as I'm looking at this first one, this says f of -4. So looking at my bounds, is -4 less than or equal to -2? Is it between -2 and 3? Or is it greater than 3? And the good news is, because these are functions and they will always pass the vertical line test, there will only be one function piece per x area. So -4 is less than or equal to -2, which means we are going to be using this pink function piece. So we're going to take 2 times the input, or -4, and then +8. So -8 plus 8 is 0. So f of -4 is equal to 0. Ta-da! Moving on to my next function piece. This says f of 6. So where does that x input lie in terms of our boundary statements? Is 6 less than or equal to -2, between -2 and 3, or greater than 3? That one is greater than 3, which means we're going to be using this bottom function piece to find what f of 6 is. So again, folks, these are all the same function, but described by different pieces. So plugging in 6 to that bottom function, we'll get the square root of my x value, which is 6, plus 3. That gives me the square root of 9. So f of 6 equals 3. Now, if a little red flag is going off in your brain going, hold up, Mrs. Cairo, I thought that we needed to include a plus or minus here. Folks, we only include a plus or minus when we are solving and using square rooting as an operation. So if I just have a single radical, we simplify it by looking for the principal positive root. But if I did square root, that's when we include the plus or minus. So our final answer for this one is just f of 6 equals 3. So for this one, f of -2, this one's a little bit tricky because as I'm looking at those 2 bound statements, -2 is less than or equal to -2. -2 is not greater than -2. So go ahead and pause the video and use this function piece.